Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. Your support helps us bring you more stories like this. Now, let us begin. Maria Alves was born in 1897 in Campanhã, a working-class neighborhood within the historic city of Porto, one of Portugal's most important cultural centers. Her childhood unfolded during a period when Portuguese society remained deeply traditional, particularly regarding the roles assigned to women. From an early age, Maria's life was shaped by expectations that emphasized obedience, modesty, and domestic responsibility rather than personal ambition. Education for girls at the turn of the 20th century was limited and practical in nature. Maria attended local primary school, where instruction focused on basic literacy, simple arithmetic, religious teaching, and household skills such as sewing and cooking. These lessons were intended to prepare girls for marriage and motherhood, not professional independence. Opportunities for secondary education existed almost exclusively for daughters of wealthy families, leaving most girls, including Maria, with few formal avenues for advancement. Religion played a central role in daily life, reinforcing social norms and discouraging deviation from accepted female behavior. Women were widely expected to remain within the private sphere, contributing to family life rather than pursuing public careers. As a result, families often saw little value in extending their daughters' schooling beyond the minimum required. In 1910, the establishment of the Portuguese Republic brought promises of educational reform and broader access for girls. However, these changes progressed slowly and had limited impact during Maria's youth. The constraints of her upbringing contrasted sharply with the independence she would later seek in adulthood and beyond, against prevailing expectations of women in Portuguese society. At the age of 19, Maria Alves made a decision that set her apart from most young women of her generation. Rather than settling into domestic life, she chose to pursue a career in the theater, an ambition considered unconventional and risky. She had already appeared on stage at Porto's Carlos Alberto Theatre, gaining her first experience before a public audience. In 1916, Maria moved to Lisbon to seek broader professional opportunities. The relocation coincided with a turbulent moment in Portuguese history. World War I was raging across Europe, and although Portugal's direct involvement was limited, the effects were deeply felt. Political instability, economic hardship, food shortages, and rising prices shaped everyday life, creating uncertainty for both workers and artists. Despite these conditions, Lisbon remained the country's cultural center, and Maria managed to secure roles at established venues, such as the Eden Theatre and the Apollo Theatre. Her performances demonstrated sufficient skill and reliability to attract attention within the theatrical community. During this period, she was hired by Osto Gomes, a prominent theater businessman who managed the nationally recognized company Portugalia. Working with Portugalia marked a turning point in Maria's career. The company's reputation offered stability and visibility at a time when consistent employment was difficult to obtain. Maria's continued appearances on Lisbon stages showed determination and adaptability amid national unrest. Her progress during the war years laid the foundation for her later success, proving that she could maintain professional momentum even when social and economic conditions were unfavorable. These experiences confirmed her commitment to theater and established her presence within Lisbon's professional circles during one of the most challenging periods of her early life. After the end of World War I, Maria Alves's career entered a period of expansion marked by travel and growing recognition. Through her work with the Portugalia Company, she joined touring productions that took her beyond Portugal's borders. These journeys brought her to Spain, France, Morocco, and Brazil, exposing her to diverse audiences and theatrical traditions. Touring demanded discipline and resilience, but it also provided opportunities unavailable to many actresses who remained confined to local stages. The international performances allowed Maria to refine her craft and strengthen her professional reputation. Each engagement added experience and visibility, reinforcing her standing within the Portuguese theater world. Travel with the troupe also reflected the company's national prominence, as Portugalia was able to organize and sustain productions abroad during the post-war years. Upon returning to Lisbon, Maria capitalized on this momentum. She secured leading roles at Parque Mayer, the city's primary entertainment district and the heart of its popular theater scene. Appearing there signaled professional success, as competition for prominent roles was intense and employment remained unpredictable. For actresses in particular, steady contracts carried significant financial importance. Maria's continued work at Parque Mayer established her as a recognizable figure on Lisbon stages. However, theatrical life remained uncertain, and long-term stability was never guaranteed. At the end of 1925, she accepted an invitation to spend the winter season performing in Porto. The engagement offered both professional continuity and financial security, making it an important commitment at a time when dependable work was far from assured. Maria Alves returned to Lisbon toward the end of March 1926, after completing her winter theater engagement in Porto. What should have been a period of relief instead became one of mounting anxiety. A central source of stress was the failure of theater producer Oscar Ribeiro to pay her final wages for the Porto performances. The unpaid money represented more than a contractual dispute, as Maria depended on steady income to maintain her livelihood. At this stage in her life, Maria carried significant family responsibilities. She was the mother of 2 children, each living apart from her. Her daughter remained in Porto under the care of Maria's parents, while her son was enrolled at a boarding school. Maria hoped to reunite her family by bringing her daughter to live with her in Lisbon, a plan that required financial stability and careful planning. The delay in payment threatened these plans and intensified her emotional strain. Acting work, even for established performers, was irregular, and missed wages could quickly disrupt household security. Maria's concern was not limited to immediate expenses, but extended to her ability to provide consistency and care for her children. These pressures accumulated quietly during her final days. Friends and colleagues later noted her growing unease, though nothing outward suggested impending tragedy. The combination of professional uncertainty, financial dependence on overdue earnings, and maternal responsibility formed the backdrop to the final days of Maria Alves's life, placing her under strain as she navigated work, motherhood, and survival in an unstable profession. This period illustrated how fragile security could be for women whose independence relied entirely on inconsistent theatrical employment during 19th-century Portugal society realities. In the quiet hours before dawn on 31 March 1926, a woman's body was discovered at the corner of a narrow back street running parallel to Avenida Almirante Reis in Lisbon. The area was dimly lit, largely deserted, and known for occasional petty crime after midnight. A passerby noticed the figure lying motionless on the pavement and alerted authorities. When police arrived, they found the young woman bruised and unresponsive, her clothing torn and disordered. Her coat, handbag, and jewelry were missing, suggesting theft. The body bore multiple abrasions, with severe bruises visible on her chest and abdomen, along with smaller marks on her legs. The condition of her dress, torn at the neckline and hem, indicated a violent struggle. With no witnesses present and no immediate identifying documents, the woman's identity was initially unknown. The body was transported to the mortuary later that morning. News of the discovery spread quickly through the surrounding neighborhood. A local resident, Amelia de Castro Neves, became alarmed when she realized her neighbor had not returned home overnight. Upon hearing reports that a young woman had been found dead nearby, she feared the worst. Accompanied by police, Amelia went to the mortuary, where she identified the body as Maria Alves, aged 29. Maria's identification transformed the case immediately. She was not an unknown victim but a recognizable actress within Lisbon's theater community. Police concluded that she had likely been attacked during a robbery gone wrong, citing the missing belongings, the location, and the absence of witnesses. This explanation was presented as a tragic yet random act of urban violence. Public attention intensified as the victim's identity became widely known. Newspapers soon carried her name, age, and profession, ensuring the investigation unfolded under growing public scrutiny across Lisbon and the wider Portuguese theater world nationally. The official explanation offered by police did not convince everyone. Among the first to publicly question the robbery theory was Ronaldo Ferrer, a journalist better known to readers as Reporter X. Ferrer was one of the most prominent crime writers of the early 20th century, widely read for his bold style and analytical approach. He was also personally acquainted with Maria Alves, having moved within the same artistic and social circles and followed her career closely. Ferrer found the circumstances of her death troubling. In his view, the idea that Maria had been randomly attacked in the street did not align with her habits or recent movements. She had only just returned to Lisbon from professional work and was not known to wander unfamiliar streets late at night. Rather than directly accuse the police of error, Ferrer adopted a more cautious and literary strategy in his writing. In a widely discussed column, he drew a parallel between Maria's death and the plot of a Spanish detective novel, El Misterio del Corral, by José Frances. In that fictional story, a famous actress is murdered not by a stranger, but by a jealous lover driven by wounded pride. By invoking this comparison, Ferrer suggested the possibility of a personal motive without making a direct allegation. Readers familiar with Maria's life understood the implication. The article stirred public discussion and doubt, reframing the case as something more complex than a simple street crime. The impact of Ferrer's words was amplified by the scale of Maria's funeral, held at Prazeres Cemetery in Lisbon. The procession drew such a large crowd that it was delayed for hours, reflecting the depth of public mourning. Maria Alves was remembered not only as an actress, but as a symbol of independence, and her death increasingly appeared to demand closer examination beyond the initial police conclusions. Following the public mourning and media scrutiny, another journalist, Antonio Ferro of Diario de Noticias, undertook a closer investigation into Maria Alves's death. Ferro's examination focused on the circumstances of the crime scene itself. He noted that no neighbors or passers-by reported hearing shouts, cries, or signs of struggle on the night Maria's body was discovered. This absence of eyewitness accounts raised doubts about the official conclusion that she had been attacked in the street during a robbery. Ferro theorized that Maria had likely been killed elsewhere, and her body was then transported and left at the back street near Avenida Almirante Reis to suggest a random act of violence. As Ferro investigated further, attention shifted toward Osto Gomez, Maria's manager and former romantic partner. Gomez had been involved in her career, employing her within the national theater company Portugalia, and maintained a personal relationship with her. Interviews with Maria's mother revealed that Gomez had a volatile temperament and was possessive and jealous, frequently arguing with Maria over perceived slights or interest from other men. Friends of Maria corroborated this characterization, describing instances of physical aggression and temperamental outbursts. These testimonies suggested that Gomez's behavior could provide a personal motive for her death, introducing the possibility of a planned attack rather than a random street crime. Ferro's reporting highlighted a growing divergence between the police's official explanation and public perception. While authorities maintained the robbery theory, his findings, combined with the accounts of Maria's mother and friends, painted a picture of a troubled personal relationship with potential for violence. This emerging narrative transformed public understanding of the case, establishing the foundation for further investigation into Gomez's involvement and heightening scrutiny of all associated witnesses and evidence. The investigation took a decisive turn with the testimony of João Monteiro, a Navy captain and neighbor of Osto Gomez. Monteiro reported that in the early hours following Maria Alves's death, he had observed Gomez traveling in a taxi with an apparently unconscious woman. This revelation introduced a crucial witness who directly linked Gomez to suspicious activity on the night of the murder. Authorities quickly identified the taxi involved as a Citroën numbered 9237, a relatively uncommon vehicle in Lisbon at the time, which made tracking the driver significantly easier. The taxi and its driver, Joel Fernandez, became central to the unfolding investigation. Fernandez provided a detailed account of the night in question. He stated that the day before, Gomez had arranged for him to wait near the Maria Victoria Theater at precisely midnight, ensuring the taxi curtains were drawn. Assuming it was a routine private meeting, Fernandez described picking up Gomez and a female passenger just past 12, noting movement and laughter in the back seat. Shortly afterward, Gomez suddenly instructed him to stop, climbed into the front seat looking pale and agitated, and admitted that he had just killed Maria Alves. According to Fernandez, Gomez then directed him to drive to a quiet location near Maria's home, where her body was left, with the intention of staging a robbery. This testimony provided authorities with a direct timeline and corroborated the theory of premeditation, contrasting sharply with the earlier notion of a random street crime. The taxi witness and driver's accounts fundamentally altered the investigation. Police now possessed credible evidence connecting Gomez to the murder, supported by the unusual vehicle, his presence with the victim, and his own admission to the driver. This testimony led to the immediate arrest of Osto Gomez, establishing the first concrete link between the suspect and Maria Alves's death, and setting the stage for his eventual confession and trial. Police questioning of Osto Gomez began immediately following his arrest, with investigators confronting him using the testimony of both taxi driver Joel Fernandez and his wife, Michelina. Initially, Gomez denied any involvement in Maria Alves's death, maintaining a composed and unrepentant demeanor. However, the weight of corroborated accounts proved overwhelming. Fernandez had provided a clear narrative of the prearranged pickup, the drawn curtains, and Gomez's own admission of killing Maria inside the taxi. Additionally, Michelina confirmed that her husband had returned home after midnight on March 31, 1926, confessing to her that he had murdered the actress and asking her to conceal Maria's coat and jewelry. These statements left little room for plausible denial. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Gomez eventually admitted to the crime during further interrogation. He stated that his motive had been jealousy and wounded pride, triggered by Maria's disclosure of an affair with a businessman while working in Porto. He described being consumed by anger and a sense of wounded honor, which he claimed compelled him to act violently. Forensic details of Maria's injuries, including bruises and cuts consistent with a struggle, aligned with his confession, demonstrating that she had resisted but had ultimately been overpowered. During the trial, Portugal's legal context shaped the outcome. The death penalty had been abolished in 1911 for all civilian crimes, including murder, so Gomez could not be executed. The court sentenced him to 8 years in prison, followed by 12 years of exile, reflecting both the seriousness of the crime and the limitations imposed by contemporary law. Joel Fernandez, as an accomplice who had facilitated the movement of the victim and assisted in staging the scene, received a 6-year prison sentence, though 2 years were suspended, acknowledging his secondary role. These proceedings concluded the formal legal reckoning for the murder of Maria Alves. The case of Maria Alves, widely remembered as the Taxi 9237 case, continued to resonate in Portuguese public memory long after the legal proceedings concluded. The trial and sentencing of Osto Gomez and his accomplice, Joel Fernandez, represented a formal effort to deliver justice, yet the story endured in newspapers, memoirs, and popular discussions for years, highlighting the social fascination with crime and scandal in early 20th century Lisbon. The case became emblematic of broader societal concerns, including the vulnerability of women, the dangers inherent in public and private spaces, and the intersection of personal jealousy and violent action. Maria Alves herself was remembered not only for the tragic circumstances of her death, but also for her independence, professional success, and presence in Lisbon's cultural life. Her career as a prominent theater actress and her navigation of a male-dominated profession underscored themes of female agency and the limited protections available to women during this era. The media coverage, from initial reporting to investigative journalism by figures such as Antonio Ferro and Ronaldo Ferrer, illustrated the growing influence of the press in shaping public perception of crime and morality. Furthermore, the case demonstrated how personal relationships, romantic entanglements, and financial disputes could culminate in violence, and how society interpreted and remembered these events. The enduring historical significance of the Taxi 9237 case lies in its documentation of gender dynamics, the role of media in crime reporting, and the legal processes of early 20th century Portugal. Maria Alves's story remains a cautionary and instructive reflection on ambition, vulnerability, and the societal constraints of her time. It continues to be referenced in discussions of historical murder cases, Portuguese theater history, and early 20th century social norms. This final reflection on the Maria Alves case highlights the lasting cultural and historical impact it had on Portuguese society. The murder, subsequent investigation, and highly publicized trial revealed how crime reporting, public fascination, and personal relationships intertwined to shape narratives of justice and morality in early 20th century Lisbon. The Taxi 9237 case became a reference point in discussions about the vulnerability of women in urban settings, especially those who sought independence and professional recognition. Maria Alves, through her career and her tragic death, came to symbolize both the opportunities and dangers faced by women navigating male-dominated social and professional spheres. The case also underscored the emerging power of investigative journalism, with reporters like Antonio Ferro and Ronaldo Ferrer shaping public opinion by meticulously questioning official accounts and exploring alternative motives. Their work demonstrated how the press could highlight inconsistencies, uncover personal conflicts, and influence societal interpretation of criminal events, even without formal legal authority. Beyond its immediate criminal and legal implications, the case invited broader reflection on gender, jealousy, social expectations, and the consequences of intimate and professional entanglements. It preserved the memory of Maria Alves, not merely as a victim of a violent crime, but as a figure whose life and death illuminated the social, cultural, and legal realities of her time. The Taxi 9237 case remains studied in historical true crime, gender studies, and Portuguese cultural history, ensuring that Maria Alves's story continues to inform and captivate scholars and the public alike.